Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar. So today we have with us Matisse, and Matisse is our master rigger. He's really one of the best experts we have locally in Montreal and probably anywhere in North America right now in terms of being able to tell us about how to use harmony in so many different ways. And he's been with Toon for just about 2 years, and today's webinar will be showing you the different elements and factors involved in rigging in harmony. So without further ado, I will let Matisse get started, but I will say that the last 50 minutes of the webinar, this webinar will take place in 1 hour, but the last 50 minutes of this webinar will be reserved for questions. Whatever questions you do have during the webinar, please type them into the question section and we will answer them within the last 15 minutes. So I'll pass it over to Matisse now, and thanks again for joining us.
All right, hey folks, it's a pleasure to be here. So thanks a lot, Desi, for the nice presentation. Let me just get settled here. So as Desi mentioned, I'm going to be talking about factors that come into the project creation. And before we get started, I would just like to ask you a little question. And actually, I would like to know if any of you have been tackling a whole animation project so far. So in the control panel of the Go to Webinar section, there is an icon on which you can click to raise your hand. And so you can raise your hand if you have. All right, so we got a few of you who have been working on animation projects, so that's great. I would love to hear more about that. So let's just go straight into my presentation. What I'm going to be talking about is basically I'm going to be giving you my personal opinion on the way to think and tackle projects. I'm going to talk about, I've identified 4 different factors that I want to be talking about during this presentation. One is time, so the deadline. One is the animation look or the style or the quality of animation that you're going for. The other one is character design, so how complex or simple your character designs are, as well as the rigging aspect that comes into play and is actually the focus that this presentation will be about is really rigging and how this is the structure that really brings your character design to life when it comes to animating it. So let's go here. All right, so what do I mean by time? Well, when you are working on a project, especially in production, there's always a deadline, right? So the production might be going on for 10 months, and for whatever amount of episode, whatever amount of people that are working on it, that's really the limit of time that the project can be completed in. So, and when you work on your personal projects, I know, as myself, I'm an artist, and sometimes I don't put a time limit on myself, but I found that it's actually really useful to do so, and I'll get back to that at the end of the presentation. But so the deadline is really the first factor that I think come into play when thinking about a project. The second one is the animation look or style. So let me pull up a little window with a bunch of different TV shows that you know about. So South Park, for example, is extremely simple, right? So the character design and the animation mostly is really straightforward. There's not all of the animation principles are applied to it. There's not going to be like lots of stretch and squash and all that, and it's just going to move. It's not going to be super fluid, just like what, if you think about like a Walt Disney feature film would be. So it's a totally different style of animation. So I'm going to go from like simple to more complex styles. So then we could have like Family Guy, where it still doesn't have a lot of like ease in and out. So like or tapers, and like it's really straightforward. It's really like snappy animation. So that's a completely different style. Then we got Rick and Morty, which is, I find, pretty similar to Family Guy, but actually I find that there is there's more animation in it than there is in Family Guy. So there's going to be more like overlapping and application of of the 12 principles of animation. Then if we go in the more complex looks, I would say, Star versus the Forces of Evil is a good example for that. So it, maybe you know it already, but if not, I definitely recommend it, by the way. But yeah, so it moves a lot. It's really snappy, but it has there's going to be a lot of overlap and follow through with all the pieces of the character. So there's a lot more motion and animation going on. And then we could go completely to like a really high end quality of animation. And not to say that the other ones are not, but this is still a cutout show. So the Lion Guard is all cut out and really looks like it's been made paperless. So it's extremely fluid. It looks pretty much just like the Lion King movie. So, it's like taking all those, that animation quality to like another level. All right. So then we go to the third factor, which is character design. So we've seen already here in those examples, simple character designs, and sometimes it's going to go and be like a very complex character design. Sometimes actually in those very simple shows, you will have like characters that will have more complicated designs. And we will see through my presentation that having a more complicated design doesn't necessarily mean that your animation look is going to be more complex, and so the rig wouldn't be as complex as it could be as well. So then I go to the rigging. So the fourth factor, the rig, which, as I said, is what I call the structure that supports the design and makes it possible to animate it. So how complex is a rig will affect how much the animation can have a quality to it or a different feel. And so what really makes a rig complex? As I said, you could have a very complex character design while having a very simple rig. And so the reason for it is that the complexity of a rig comes from the level of interaction between the assets of the character design. So I will now go to Harmony and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so for example, I have a little animation here, and I won't be able to play back the animations. I'll have to scroll through just because there's a little delay between your screen and mine. But this is just a little loop. And this character is actually really, really simple. And I'll go through it later on, but as you can see, when I click on the assets, like nothing has been broken down. It's really just like big pieces that are animated individually. So I've made a list of like 4 possibilities of complexities split up between the design, the animation, and the rig. So you could have like a very simple design, a very simple animation, and therefore go for a very simple rig such as this one that doesn't have any, not many layers and not much interaction between the layers. And I'll talk about that interaction later on when we get to the more complex part of it. So you could also have a design that is simple, so I could have like this little guy, but decide that, oh, actually, I would really want to be able to animate the sleeve on its own without having the arm attached to it. So I would have to break my character design into a lot more pieces in order to be able to do that complex animation. So there's actually Two ways. If I have a simple design and I want to achieve a complex animation, what I could do is decide, okay, I will break down my character into more layers, and therefore I will have more layers to animate. Or I could decide I will still keep it at a fairly low amount of different layers, but I will redraw more. So what I mean by that is, let me go to another example here. Okay. So what I mean by that is that if the full arm, like here on the left, it's all in one layer. And for example, I've added like this little stripe on the sleeve. If the arm moves like that, I might want the sleeve, the little stripe, to show that the arm is pointing towards us and therefore have a different curve here than the curve when it's like pointing towards the back of the character. And if I want that without having to create new layers, then it means that I will have to draw more. So what is currently going on here is that I have one drawing with the stripe downward C, and then I have another drawing that I just exposed with the stripe going the other way. If I want to actually, if I accept that I will split up my layers into, or my drawings into more layers, which I did here, so the stripe is a layer on its own. The arm is still a little sandwich here. And what I did is that I put a deformer on my stripe and I animated that. So my stripe is actually like a straight drawing that is being animated. So of course, this is just to like give you an idea of what I mean by complexity and layer separation and all that. But this is still fairly simple. Although if I wanted to be like if I wanted my arm to really match the stripe or the pose that I'm trying to do, I would have separated the sleeve as well. I would have put like a downward drawing like this, and then an open drawing with probably like the back of the sleeve that shows up behind the arm. So there's levels of complexities that you don't have to go through all of them, but there's levels. So the good thing is that you totally are the master of the destiny of your animation. So you really decide like what, to what amount, to what extent you will put the amount of work and in which category. So let me rephrase that. So for example, if I have like my time constraint, right? So I have 4 months to do my little project. And what I want is to have like a high level of animation. But I don't want to spend time rigging so much and have so many parts to animate individually. So, and I'm actually like pretty skilled at drawing, so I will simply redraw everything every time I need like to do like those different angles. So that would be one option, right? So that means that I will spend less of my 4 months deadline in rigging, and I will spend most of it in animation. I could also spend a lot of time in rigging, making a rig that is more complex but works very well, and I don't have to redraw anything. And that might be the most efficient way for me to work, because maybe I prefer just moving pieces around instead of redrawing them. Okay, so I have actually prepared a couple different examples. And so my focus, yeah, I wanted to say that my focus obviously is on the rigging aspect of things, but one thing that is really important when you rig is the joints. So, elbow joints, shoulder, knees, all the places where your character pieces and body parts are going to rotate. This is actually something that can be approached in many ways. There's many ways to deal with joints, and I find that it's like the first and biggest challenge actually in rigging, no matter how complex your rigs are. So in here, okay, I haven't animated this one. So in here, what I did is a very simple, let me go in the example. It's a very simple asset. So I basically have only one drawing layer, on top of which I have a deformer. And in this case, with such an asset, right, so as I'm dealing with joints, I'm talking about joints here, I don't have to create any system for the joint. I'm really just bending the deformer. Now, every single system that I'm going to show you has benefits and like pros and cons, basically, right? So any tool that Harmony provides you with is really a tool. So you are the one that is supposed to pick the best tool to be efficient in your work. So, for example, this is great. You know, I can do a bunch of movement, but it might not be the solution, the proper solution for me, if in my animation my character puts his arm like this in such a position, right? So maybe I'm gonna have to find another way to deal with this. If the character is just like moving it this way and not breaking and the deformer, the drawing is not breaking, that's what I mean by breaking, then I don't have to worry about this, and this way is actually just fine, right? So that's what I did for my character animation. So we'll go back to that character animation towards the end of the webinar. So that's one way. Okay. Then I have, I'll go into something complex, and then I'll go back to something a little bit more simple. Okay, what I have here is the same arm, obviously, but this one is split up into many different parts, right? So you can see I have like pivot points for all of them, and the sleeve is split up. So in this case, you know, if I wanted to do like a overlap and follow through motion with the sleeve, this rig would allow me to do so. And what I did for the elbow, so let me just show you the assets first. Okay, so you can see that each asset has a full outline. And this is really useful when you bend, because when you bend, you want to have like the outline of below the elbow, right? You don't want to have like just a weird gap or a straight line for your asset, because it wouldn't make sense unless, you know, you're trying to achieve a look that, you know, makes people think that it's like paper, you know, paper characters that are just like cut up and all that. So of course there's reasons to do it this way. But so what I did for the joint here is that I have a little patch. Let's go into drawing. So I have a little patch that is simply put over the elbow, and I can move it in order to change the overlay. So what am I talking about here? Let's make a forearm rotation. Okay. So when my forearm is over the upper arm, I see that I have my overlay here because the lines are not merging in this case, and I'll talk about merging lines. And then I can use my patch to move it around, reshape, you know, create exactly the type of line that I want to use. Personally, it's not been a way of rigging that I've used a lot, or, you know, for my own personal creations, but it is something that I've seen in professional environments. So that's always good to know. Now, how is this done? There's a little interesting thing here. Okay, so how is this done? I have my color on one end, right? So there's two things going on. So if we look at my patch, the patch is bigger than the arm drawing. And so what I did is that I decided that the patch would only be visible within the arm, but not just within the whole arm drawing, because I don't want to lose my outline. So I said it's only going to be visible through the color. So I used an auto patch, and I might be able to squeeze in like an explanation about the auto patch, but I can do that later in time. I just want to make sure that we cover all the topic. So so yeah, it shows only within the auto patch, which basically means that it will only show through the color of my asset. Great. Now this little handle is a handle, and since my let's just reset that. Okay. Since my patch is here and like the same color as the skin, it might not always be easy for me to click on it. So instead I have a little handle. Of course, the handle is not part of my design, and I don't want it to be visible in my render of my animation. So if I actually go in my render view, we don't see it. How come? I have my little, the patch is on the line art, the handle is on the overlay. I have two drawing layers that show the same thing. They're both the same element, just two instances of it. In one, I only see the handle on the overlay. On the other one, I see all the rest of the layers, but only the line art is being used. And here under the one that is only the handle, I have something called remove transparency. Why do I have that? Because my handle, I've put alpha on it. I've put enough alpha that I still see it, so I can still click on it, but remove transparency will make invisible any color that has alpha in it, so which is why I'm not able to see it in render. One of the yeah, I'll go with the other example to show that. Okay, here's an even more complex merge system. So what I have here is it's still making use of the auto patch, but I don't have a patch per se. So I don't have a patch like I have in the other example. But you will see that I'm still able to bend things over. I still have an overlay of my forearm that shows up. Great. And one other thing that is amazing with these kind of like layer separation is that, in case you don't know, in Harmony there's a 3D space that exists. So I'll quickly just show that. Great. This means that I'm able to bring elements in front of others or behind others. And I can do that by clicking on my asset and clicking on Alt and up to push backwards or down to bring towards me. So it's as if my keyboard was like a plane, and the up and down are like, closer to me or further from me. And so having like multiple layers like that works great to send an asset back and forth in the Z space. And because I have a merge system, my merge system works all the time. Now you will see that when I send my asset backwards, I don't see an overlay for my upper arm line. And before creating it for you, I will show you actually how my merge system works. So inside this little group that I've called merge system, I actually have a bunch of nodes which are, creating this system of like, I don't have any outline visible when I'm over this specific asset. So let's go in it. All I want you to remember here before I go in the group is that the right port is my upper arm The middle is my lower arm, and the left one is the hand layer. I'll go inside it. So basically what's going on here is that my my line art of every single layer gets cut by the color of all the other layers, right? So when they overlap, it's impossible for the line to be visible. And on top of that, so that's like my line art being cut by the auto patch of the lower arm, upper arm, lower arm, hand. And it's the same system everywhere. They're just cutting one another. Now, I also have the overlay layer that I haven't made use of yet, that will connect right in front of my merging system, so my line art and all that. So let's just create that overlay. I'll copy those two lines. I'll put them on the overlay layer, and I will simply go here and adjust the artwork and make it look, give it the look that I want. Here, I'm going to create extra points and modify the thickness of my line just to give it, you know, a little nicer feel. Sweet. All right, so there it is. By the way, I know I'm going pretty fast through this demonstration, but the cool thing is that this scene will be available to you. So everything that I'm currently setting up, you'll have access to it. You'll have plenty of time to analyze it and, you know, use it as an example and a reference for you to create your own rigs. Oh yeah, and another thing that I've done here, so let's just go back to here. Okay, is that it? Yeah, that's my elbow patch. Great. Okay, so I would just want to compare those two rigs. If I move the full arm, you'll see that the sleeve drawing hasn't been completed, and it's definitely not merging with, you know, the rest, which is fine. But I might want to be able to have it merge. And like, what if I want my character to do something like this? Like, you know, go from, oh, let me just pick a color. Go from, like, having the shoulders, the arms down, to saying like, I don't know. So like getting his shoulders up. Oops, too big. Who knows, you know? So like, how do I do that? Currently, so it means that this part of my character, I would want to be able to move it. Currently, the way that this is set up, it's like a complex little thing going on, but with this rig, I'm not able to do it. So let's go to the other one here. All right, so I can rotate. I have completed the merge system between the sleeve and the trap. And if I just go on here, I would be able to make it go higher, put that down, and make that little pose of like, I'm not sure what's going on. Right? Okay. So of course, the more flexibility you want in your rig directly, the more complex it becomes. So you have to be ready for that. Okay, so then I'm going to show the one that is pretty cool, pretty useful, and has no merge system at all. Okay, so all I have is an upper arm drawing with the full outline. Oh, and we see that my lower arm doesn't have a full outline. Now let me explain what's going on here. Okay. even though my forearm doesn't have a full outline, when I rotate it, because of the exactly very precise pivot location, it rotates within a circle. So the user will never know, or the viewer, I would say, would never know that, this is not a drawing that has a full outline. I don't think someone would think of that anyway, but they won't know that it's not the case. But the thing is that let's now bring in like a fake torso image and talk about, playing with the z-axis. So if I push that back, my problem is that now I see the outline of the upper arm. So what I did is that I went with the like redraw option. And so the upper arm actually has two different drawings. Okay, one that has the full outline, just like you see now, and one that has no full outline, just like the forearm in this case. So they both have one drawing that doesn't have the full outline and one drawing that has the full outline. So whenever I would have something like this where all of a sudden I see my outline of an asset that I shouldn't be seeing, I would switch to my other asset that doesn't have this line. Now, obviously, this is what I meant by like, paper looking drawing. If that's a style that you're going for, great. If it's not, you need some help here. So, which is why on the forearm, I also have this drawing with the full outline, right? So I can simply switch between the drawings and not have to deal with any complexity in terms of like merging system. There's no merging system in place. It's really just like a fake thing going on here. So that's another option. All right, let's analyze a bit of animation here. Okay, so as I said, this one is a very, very simple type looking character. It's just a bunch of deformers. Basically, everything has been animated with deformers. This big round thing is the one for the hair, right? And like because of the hair design and the amount of line that it has, it looks a bit funky if I push it too much, so I didn't. And yeah, the arm, if we just look at that here, so it's really just one drawing being animated over and over again. The only time that I decided that I would use the redraw instead of like, well, I wanted to keep this rig simple, right? So I went with the redraw option. And the only place where I have substitution, so substitution is what we call like when a layer has multiple drawings and, if I had like multiple shapes of hands, they would all be in my substitution. So it's in the face. So what I did is that if we look at the animation here, the character turns his head towards us a little bit, just a little, just to give it a bit of more like interesting feeling. So here's the view where he's really like more facing us. And to do that, at first what I did is I moved the assets that I had already, I moved them around, to recreate like what would look like a front looking view. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do something like this, maybe not here, I'm gonna stretch it here, I'm gonna move it over. But in the end, I figured, I'm just gonna create, modify the drawings to fit my need exactly. So let me undo that. Okay. So what I did is that when it comes to this view, as you can see, it's now a second drawing. It's now a second drawing for the glasses as well. And yeah, I did another eye. Oh no, that was not even it. The eye was the same, it's just that I have one that's open. And did I do a second face? Yes. Yeah. So I did that basically. So it's just to give you a bit of ideas of like how to achieve, the type of animation that you want to achieve. Now, of course, there's so little separation that in here I wouldn't be able to move the peace line and around in the shirt. Whereas for the more complex ones, if you go in my here, let me just, oh, that's not it. Okay, here the peace sign, you can move it and it's only going to show through the shirt. So there's a bunch of things for you to analyze here. And let's go have a look at another little animation with what I personally consider like a more complex design than the one that I have. But this one is still done with a very simple rig system. It's actually all deformers as well. So it's pretty cute. It's a super cute character. The animation is really nice, super fluid, fun to look at. So you'll have that as well. And so here's the little character. We still see that actually the rig involves a lot more pieces than the one that I have. If I do this, we can see that it's deformers that is moving it around, but I'll let you analyze that and see how it's made. And then if we wanted to do something like very complex, we could go all the way and make a ton of layer separation. Like, let's just, for the sake of it, look at the character. It's huge. It's like massive. And this character is actually made in a way that he's able to do a full 360. And that's possible because of the use of deformers, envelope deformers, and the fact that, like, you know, the shapes are all divided in so many different layers that you're able to manipulate on your own. So yeah, so something that's pretty important, I find, is to know that the more you complexify a rig and the more you separate the character design into tiny pieces, it means that you have just as many pieces to move around in your animation. Of course, in Harmony, you're able to parent things together, right? So even if I have like 4 pieces or more here, I'm still able to move them all together as one. But if I want to play with all those little pieces, it just means that I'm spending a ton of time rigging. I'm spending also a ton of time animating. If I'm super skilled at it, great. It might totally work for me, but it's really something that's important to consider. All right, so to sum this up, I guess the talk was about, creating and applying a professional environment to your personal projects. I find one thing that I really find useful, as I mentioned in the beginning, is putting a deadline on myself on my personal projects. I find that having a constraint is actually makes me a better artist and pushes like the limits and the learning, that I do through my personal projects. And one benefit that I find for personal projects over professional ones is that you are the one who will decide how you will deal with all the 4 factors that I've mentioned. Whereas in a production, unless you are like a lead of a department and all that, you don't necessarily have a say over the look of the character design, what the animation look is going to be like, or even how much time you have to do like all those 52 episodes, So as a personal, on your personal projects, you can really control all of that. And so what I find like a challenge that I would give to you all is to think about a project that you would like to do, put a deadline on it, and then build the character design based on how you want the animation to look. Like the animation look and the character design to me come kind of like at the same. They're kind of like they're not the same step, but like they come together at the same level. I find, but think about like, okay, what do I really want to do? Do I want to animate more? To, what's the most important thing for me? Do I want to create a project where the animation is like stunning? Do I want something that is snappy and funny? Do I want to actually show off my character design skills? And then how will I make this project possible through rigging, through building the structure for my character that will then be enable me to animate it. So I guess that's it. I actually finished like 5 minutes earlier, so we have more time for Q&A.
So we have a lot of great feedback, a lot of people thanking us for this webinar. Just type in your questions in the questions and answer section, and we'll answer them. An interesting question comes from Don, and he wants to know, when you are rigging a character, is there a way to reset at default, T, pose, continue on another key pose?
Okay, so yes, I think I know what you mean. So let's just, I can go with the simple design for that. Actually, this one is deformer, so I'll show you, how to do that with deformers, and I'll show you how to do that with pegs. Okay, I have my deformation group. Here is my pose. Let's just remove it. Actually, okay. Here I go. I will pose my arm. Great. I will go at a later frame, and now you say you want to start from fresh, from like the arm just down straight at default position. What I can do is, let's just create a key here, F6, and I can reset current keyframe. And this will put it back to the default look of the deformer. It's being animated at the moment, but no worries, I didn't lose my pose. So that, if you do that with pegs, pegs. Okay, here. Great. So I will pose my arm, and later on I will also make a key here. So let's have a key here. No interpolation. And here I will say, okay, I will select the pegs and I will hit Shift R. So Shift R is the one that allows you to reset a peg to the default position. So when I actually move something, what did I use to move that? Here. There's now values, like rotation values in this case. When I hit Shift R, the values will reset, but you will see that the only value that will never reset is the one giving the pivot point. So that's really handy.
It's really cool. Here's another interesting question from Sebastian. Can you please show us a pro way to rig a character with a 360 rotation?
Okay, well, as I said earlier, it's like the thing that takes the most, like, the longest time rigging. So I will not be able to show that right now, but I can show you like the gist of how it's done, right? So actually I do have that Orcus, and I have it as like just a rotation, so I'll just bring that. Okay. Whenever you create a character, let me just get this straight. Okay. Whenever you create a character, first you need to draw the turnaround, right? This will be really important in order to be able to draw your character faithfully and create the front, quarter front, profile, quarter back, and back. It becomes, I find, like it's just as important in a 360, but it's like almost more important in some way. Like it's really important in any case, but in a 360, it's crazy important. Because what happens is that you will rig one view, for example, the front, and so you will separate every single little thing, and you will never separate it enough. So you will think, oh, that's fine. I'll be able to, move that piece around and make it fit for the back view and all that. But in the end, as you build the other views, you will end up separating more and more. So expect a very, very heavy rig building session. Then every single asset will have an envelope deformer on it. How do you create an envelope deformer? Let me just do that here. I am creating a shape. Oh, maybe not that one. Okay, let's just create like a random layer. I won't save the scene, so I won't be all like randomized right now. But okay, I have this. I'm putting it on the same layer, which really I shouldn't be doing, but it's really just to go fast. Okay, I'm gonna build an envelope deformer. So I'm just going around my shape, wrapping it up like an envelope, and I press Alt in order for my last point to also be my first point. I will then move the Bezier handles and the points. So this is the placement, the positioning of the points, and all the amount of points you have. It's all things that you will have to play with to see like how it affects your shape and how it doesn't affect it. But yeah, so, and then I would have this shape that I would be able to, maybe it's my torso, and I would be able to change it like that when he's super proud, so you would be able to animate between that. So basically every single piece has that. And if we just look at the face a little bit, you will see that the shape evolves through the deformer. You see this little point here? This one moves quite a bit in order to change the shape of the jaw. So imagine doing that on basically every single layer. If you want to try that out, create the simplest character design ever and do it on that very simple character design with no shape that cuts into another shape, just to really try out and yeah, try it out for yourself and you'll see. Also, if you ever run into any issue with that, feel free to just send us an email.
You can always send us an email at webinars@toonboom.com, and we'll definitely be able to answer your questions, especially the ones we don't cover off in today's webinar. So the next question is basically from Miguel, and he's asking, can you show us again how to connect the auto patch node to the line art and then the color art nodes?
Yep. Okay. And you will have like the scene to look it up. Where's my merge? Deformer. Merge system. Okay. I'll remove the connections here and I'll just build it for you. Okay. All my assets are prepared the same way. On the line art, I have the outline. On the color art, I have the color. On the overlay, I have the overlay. Then, so I'll show you between two assets, and I do the same thing for everything, right? So for all the rest. So what I will say is I will have my color here, and I will say, okay, so let's just put the color for those two assets here. I will say, all right, I want the outline of my forearm to be cut by the auto patch of my arm. Okay, so I have a cutter, it's being cut by what? The auto patch, great. Now, if I was to move one of them in the z-axis, it would not work, so I need the merge system to be symmetrical, so everything that gets cut has to cut the other thing as well. I would do the same thing with the hand here. Okay. Then right now everything works. Simply I don't have my overlay, which is why I took an overlay layer node and I'm simply connecting it in front of all that system. So I have my color art in order to preserve the color and be able to see it. I have my line art that is used to be cut by something else, and I have the auto patch, which is the thing that cuts the line art.
Very cool. So the next question is more of a tip. So Miguel is also looking for a tip, and he's asking, any tips for mouths and lip sync?
Yes, but I am not going to be able to cover that in this webinar.
Well, what we could do is maybe in a couple of weeks we'll have another webinar on that topic, because it is a quite in-depth topic, and it's quite interesting to cover off in a 1 hour webinar. So thanks for that. Chris is asking, can you show us how a paperless rig would look like?
Okay, so a paperless looking rig,
Yes.
right? Because if it's paperless, it means that it's frame by frame, and so you don't rig anything. What I meant, so you're probably like wondering like what I meant with like, oh, this is a rig, it's cut out, and it looks paperless. Well, it's done exactly the way that I showed you with the orc. So that is what makes it look paperless. It's the fact that everything has an envelope deformer around it. Mm-hmm. And what the envelope deformer means is that it gives you the ability to deform completely the shape. So you don't have to redraw in order to like have a bent forearm, for example. You just have to play with the deformers. And the control points of those deformers, moving them adds a value in the software, and the software will interpolate between values. So so if I bend something this way and I bend it the other way here, well, the software will interpolate all the other ways. So that's what creates the paperless look.
Good. Here's a good question from Max regarding curves. So he basically says, curves to modify the shape. Is there a secret to maintaining the proportions of the character?
Yeah, your eyes, actually. It's really it really comes down to that. Sometimes having something that is not that where the proportions are not maintained is great when you want to add some stat and actually like liveliness. Yes. to an animation. So like, for example, I'm not going to animate right now, but if my arm was doing a really fast movement, at some point I could have it be like really stretched out like that, and it's obviously no longer with the proper volumes, or well, it still maintain the volumes, but it's no longer on model, for example, but it will give a great feeling to my animation. So having things out of proportion can sometimes be really good.
In terms of other learning material, Matisse has covered a lot in this webinar, but if you guys do want to go online, if you go to lynda.com, there are a couple of tutorials you could check out as well. Dermot O'Connor is a big Harmony user, and he does do a lot regarding lip syncing and rigging as well. So he would be someone interesting to go look at online. Also, if you just Google us or you go to YouTube, there's a couple of other great tutorials. John Taylor out in the UK also does some tutorials that might be able to help you. Yeah,
and to add on to that, we offer training here at Toon. So if you are ever interested in that, you can contact us as well. You can contact us through the webinar at toonboom.com and request, prices and things to cover in a training.
Perfect. We have time for a couple more questions. Here's one from Gabriel. Any blink timing tips?
I wouldn't have like tips for the timing of blink, but I do have a tip for the drawing of blinks. Okay. So let's say that I have like one eye here. I will go, okay, I will extend it. So what I've seen is that blinks are usually covered in 4 drawings. One will be like the fully open blink. I'm just duplicating this drawing here. The other one, the eyelid, and think of the eyelid as being heavy. All right, so before it drops, it has to kind of like fall on the eye. So at first, it doesn't drop a lot. Okay, so it moves slowly. It has to build momentum. So at first, it does that. Then let's duplicate this again. I'll erase that. Then the eye could be completely closed, right? So let's say that, this is just like skin. It could be completely closed. And once you want to reopen the eye, well, since the eyelid is heavy, it means that it's gonna open up, but like it's gonna be lower, right? So if you had like an eye here at the pupil, it would be lower there. So usually that gives like pretty good looking, oops, what happened here? 2, 3, just let me change, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that would be my tip.
So we're just going through a few more. So here's something from Emily. If we have about 4 more minutes, hopefully we won't go too much longer. How can you change the color of the character completely to match the environment and atmosphere, but without changing the original color of the character?
Yes, I like that question. So it's actually one of the great things about Harmony, the way that our color palettes work. So just before answering that, just in case people don't know, our color palettes, once you've colored something, it's basically a number that you paint an area with, and you can modify what that color is associated, that area or that number is associated to in terms of color, and wherever that number was used, it's going to change. Here I have my palette, and I want to keep this one, right? Because you said you don't want to be modifying the original palette. So what I'll do is I will clone it. Cloning in this case is better than duplicating because the color IDs, so the numbers for each swatch, stay the same. Then I'm going to right click on it again, and I'm going to go in Tint Panel. I will have this window, and I will select all the colors that I want to be modifying. So currently all of them. I will go into blend mode, and I will pick a color. Let's say, maybe we want to make it like party time. Like maybe he's in a club, and the light is pink. And I'm going to make sure to click on preview in order to see what I'm doing. And I'm going to decide what amount of pink I am applying to all those colors. So of course I could also decide, well, the line is not going to be modified, or the skin, or whatever it is, right? And I can always modify the color that I'm just giving to the character. When you hit apply, there you go. You have your palette with the Super Club palette, and you have the daytime palette, and that's it.
Excellent. So we have time for one more question. And the question is, how can you give perspective to a movement, like a character throwing a punch or kick to the camera?
You could do it in different ways. I think the most efficient way really would be to redraw. So, like kicking in the camera, I would simply redraw the leg and foot when it needs to be really close. It would look better probably. If you were to ask me the same question about like a character walking towards the camera, I would say you just animate the walk, you put it on a peg, and that peg, you make it move from far away to closer to the camera, and then it will just get bigger. You won't even have to do anything.
Very cool. So we're out of time. We didn't manage to answer all the questions that were asked, but you can always email us at webinars@toonloom.com, and we'll do our best to answer them within a reasonable amount of time. Thanks again for joining us, Matisse. You were amazing as always.
Thank you.
And again, thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you all enjoyed it and learned a lot. And again, send us your questions. Thank you.